Alright, so this video is going to be a little different than my normal videos. It's going to be even less professional than usual because I don't know exactly what I'm going to say or what I'm going to figure out. But this is from a set of games, closed games I played against Zoom that I thought were really interesting. I tend not to be on at the same times as Zoom, and my excuse for the bad results coming up will be that this was because it was, mostly at 4 or 5 a.m. because I had a bad night. But I also think it doesn't really matter how I played. I thought how Zoom played was really interesting. I thought he outplayed me game after game, and I wanted to sort of explore it and think about his moves a little. And you see the game and you see them play the moves, but you don't usually look back and see, what cards did they have? What were they thinking? And the reason you see 5 cards on the right and 4 cards on the left is because I don't know what his last card was. I had played Zoom, so I played Zoom last night. These are from last night. This video will be 2 weeks later, so that doesn't matter to you. But I played him the night before, and I had thought he played a really interesting game out of a plus formation on second turn, where he beat me, but also showed me, I think, how second turn should be aiming to defend the plus formation. I couldn't find that game to show, though, but I thought it was really exemplary, really. I've never been good at defending the plus formation, so I'm just throwing random cards out. But if there are cards in 5 and 2, I will usually not play in 2 for fear they'll go in 8 because I have difficulty defending this kind of position. But I think he showed a really good way to do so and a good way to go make the move in 2 such that you'll be prepared to handle this. So I thought that was a fascinating game. Maybe I'll get into what the core concepts there were. We'll see. Excuse me. But I just wanted to look over the games I played. I'm going to start with the games I had first turn, and just say the score, he didn't slaughter me or anything in score, though he won pretty cleanly. But I just felt every game I was getting outplayed. I thought he played tremendously. I'm not going to spend too much time discussing my moves because there are lots of videos of me discussing my moves in closed. I don't think this was my greatest work or anything, but also I was making what I thought were pretty normal moves and getting severely outplayed. So I started in 5 here. I didn't really have a move in 5 that set up all that much. I thought this had nice synergy with 7A297, potential synergies with 6-3-A9 playing into the 3, the double numbers sometimes playing into the 10. Not a starter I was super happy with, but I'd like to go to his move because I think it's more interesting. If I was in his position, my first instinct would be to look for corners. And I think one easy mistake to make here would be to assume that whatever move he played is the move type he thinks is best in this position, is kind of the ideal move he'd want to make. And that's a mistake, right? There are lots of times where the hands don't justify the move you'd like to make if the hand did justify it, or your opponent makes a move that does a good job stopping you making the most desirable move. So you can watch, 2 great players play and see, oh, that's weird, they never do this move. But that's because the other person has been playing specifically to stop that move, and it actually is the important move. But if you just watch them play, you'll never see it happen because it is so deftly avoided by the player trying to stop it. So I think I shouldn't assume that whatever he did is what he wants to do in general. If we see patterns emerge, that's great. But I will say what I would think about on his turn is I would try to find a corner with significant synergies with the hand that sets it up multiple ways. And the easiest way to look for that is usually looking, what cards do I have that have the same number facing in as the center card does? And his hand really doesn't have good ways to play off for a corner. So I think he doesn't play a corner here. And we don't know what his 5th card is, so maybe there was good corner potential and we can't see it. But I think the assumption here should be, we don't know if he would have preferred a corner, but there may not have been any appealing corners, and in that situation, here is the side he chose to go for. And I think there's sort of some arguments. There are players who their side plays, they like to capture center starters. There are players who like to slide next to it with weaker numbers out. And there are players that like to match it, match the central number. And that leads to a sort of interesting dichotomy of players, where I think if you look at the really good players, I think MC really likes to match. I think there are a bunch of others who like to go under or match depending on what their hand provides. I think generally the players that capture are on the weaker end of the spectrum, and that looking to flip it, specifically flipping it with a higher number, I think is not a good reply. It makes you very vulnerable if they have any play against your card. Because there are kind of two ways closed games finish up. And one is like, I don't know, they land in some formation. This is not how you'd get there, but you land in some queue, and you get a final position like this where they're the two sides open and you're thinking, which combos do they have? And then the other one is, you land in some queue and they take you and you're probably going in the side spot and they're going the corner at the end. And I think if you play an overpowering play, something like this, where that center card is going to have a lot of combo potential, if they have any play against your top card, all the lines where you're ending with a side move here or here, and they get to go in the corner, are just so dangerous, such horrible spots for you, that I think it's a really risky type of play. And I certainly don't advocate that. And Zoom did not do that. In this game, Zoom went for a matching play. He has two matching plays. He has 4897 and 7876. Looking myself, this sets up 7876, while this sets up A874. This sets up A874 for combos both ways, but the combo isn't that important when you've matched. But it does give a way to equal it. Well, this gives no ways to equal. You'll either be vulnerable to some combo somewhere. So I think he did the matching move that he had the most ways to sort of play neutrally around, to set up matches, to set up sames. And the sames aren't specifically so you have some big combo at the end. It's so that you're not vulnerable to combos. And so he went with this. And again, this is not a move I would look at if I saw a corner, but the idea of the best kind of side I can find, if we're assuming what Zoom plays is right, and I was so impressed by how he played, and Zoom has a clear closed pedigree. He went to the finals of one of the closed tournaments. I think he's clearly a very good closed player. And I think in general, it's just interesting to seek out great closed players and see how they think. And you may not think Zoom is as good a closed player as I do, in which case you would seek out a different closed player, and that's fine. But I thought he'd be an interesting person, and I haven't had any matches as long as I did with Zoom here. I should also say Elemental was on. I don't know where the Elementals were. I'll point it out if I think there were some that affected the game. I know there's one game that was decided by it, but explicitly decided by it. But we're going to mostly be ignoring the Elementals and kind of looking for fundamentals. So the first thing Zoom does is he plays a matching play, matching side play to a center starter. I went 9, 3, 7, 9, and 3. I got a lot of plus walls in 6, though nothing that affects 5 there. And I thought it covered everything that could go in 1. Technically, if he plays exactly a 9 out, but it covers 10s out from 1, and I wanted to cover things in 1, I also cover everything 9 and down that could go in 7. The one square I don't have really good coverage of the standard squares people play in is 6. So I would say there are 4 standard squares people play in. Sometimes you'll see 9, you'll basically never see 8. But the 4 standard squares are 1, 2, 6, and 7. 2 is the least frequent, and 2 happens when they have a combo on the card in 3. We're going to, by the way, call this setup with the cards in these 3 spots a J, because it sort of looks like the letter J. If you look at it like this, it can be rotated or flipped any which way. It's still a J. But we're going to be calling this a J setup, and it's, one of the most, if not the most important setup in closed. And the main three defenses are 1, 6, and 7, with 2 as a secondary defense if you have the setup kind of exactly right. One of the weaknesses, I think, of going in 2, just pretend they had the big combo in 6, is, let's say I flipped, but you could flip back, so pretend this did that. You get to this setup, and it's actually, like, not so clean, because if the first turn player goes here, and there's any combo potential here, it's really hard to defend, even though you have more cards, you know, up top where it seems like it should be safe. And if they go here first, it can also be tricky. And I think spots where there's a clear block like this, first turn does better than you'd expect, kind of no matter what you expect. And so I think while 2 can be very clever, 2 with the point you take from 1, I go 6, I lock in 2 and 3, I don't think it actually plays out as well as it looks, because it looks like second turn's getting a clear advantage, and I think instead it's pretty balanced. Other squares are 1, 6, and 7. So I was interested where he would go out of the J setup, and in our first example of the J, he goes in 6, which does happen to be the square I don't have. So that sucked for me, but it is possible that 6 is the square I'm going to have least here, right? There are 2 cards that set up against 1. There's 1 card that sets up against 7, but 7 is touching his own card, not mine. So he can't combo back if I flip that unless he combos the card in 8. So 2 is the square he can play, where he has combo potential. You notice his hand doesn't show combo potential against it, but he has another card, and we'll get to that. But this is the one where he can have combo potential against it. It is not allowing the block to emerge in the same way that 2 does. And it is a potentially difficult card for me to take. I have no cards to use to play off it, just the 2 walls. Now I will note, I could force that kind of block structure by doing something in 2. And I don't think that's always wrong. But if I don't have any good play in 6, it's a lot harder to do that. So I did have a win recently in a closed game where I just played 2 here, and I think it was winning on the spot, because I had a huge combo threat in 9, and they kind of couldn't cover 1 and 9 at the same time, and I had a combo threat in 7. And I think it was just a forced win no matter what their hand was. And I think 2, while not the ideal option, can be an underrated option, because I do think that block of 2 rows of 3 can be really good for first turn. But I don't think it is here. I don't really know why I did the move I did. Probably should have gone for the Z, but I felt like the T. Weird move. That's okay though. And how did he react to the T? He grabbed a card. Now, importantly, this leaves everything open to combos from 2, but that's a really unlikely combo to have. Now, I don't know why I didn't take this way. Why didn't I take this way? I think I thought it was important to combo, but now it looks ridiculous. Of course I take... I know why. There was an elemental on 7. Yeah, so this actually had no captures here and was incredibly depressing, so I had to go with the card I didn't want to use. And then he played here and went, oops, I thought I had the plus or plus wall there. And like must have mixed up the 4 and the 7, or thought the 4 was a 2 or something. Anyways, but I felt like I was completely outplayed this game, right? They played in the T square. I'm going to call this the Q square because it allows a Q. This the T square because it allows a T. And this... I don't have a good name for this one. This one's the slide in because its point is you slide next to something and then combo it. I like to call that sliding. We'll call this the challenge square. Sort of the one that says, you have to take me or you're way behind. So the main square is the Q, the T, the challenge, and the slide. In my experience, Seto tends to go most often in the T. MC goes in the challenge square quite a bit. I really like to go in the Q square, and a bunch of other players I think are very good do as well. I don't think any of those players are locked into always doing that, but each player has certain biases here. And if you are used to an opponent, it is worth knowing. And I might be wrong about those players' biases, so you should, find it for yourself. But if you know a player likes to go there, and also it'll be different, right? Because I will put different cards in 5 and in the corner than you might to get to the J, and that will lead them to play somewhat differently. So if I think someone always goes in the T-square, that might be because they always go in the T-square against the exact types of ways I play it, and they might not against you. But I do notice some patterns, and it is useful to be ready for the patterns you're likely to see, right? Because I probably won't have the challenge square, the T-square, and the Q-square all covered, right? I probably won't have all 3 of these covered. I'll have some coverage of each. And if you know, they go in the T, then making sure not to play a J where the T is a problem is a good idea. But I didn't know where Zoom goes. And I just felt I'm way behind here. And here I had to use a card I didn't want to use. And if they had anything, if they could plus wall 2 or plus wall 8, my last card is terrible. I should lose this game. I think I would have lost this game had Zoom not confused his cards. I think I played really badly. And I think Zoom handled it well. But we can also see, his first 2 moves ended up just giving him this massive advantage where I couldn't play comfortably against it. The 7s out are not large numbers out, but they were high enough that a lot of my hand was just dead at capturing it. And my hand was sort of weak and weird going up and down, but I think that's going to be true a decent amount. That just, it doesn't say you can't take it, but it says some of your hand is going to be dead, and that's going to be really annoying. So the game plan here was he thought he had the combo in 2, so he slid along in 6, which is the T-square. And he played this matching side. So I don't know if there's much more to say about this game. I'm just going through the games and trying to figure them out myself. Excuse me while I type in the next hands. But I just wanted to notice patterns in a player that I thought plays differently than I do, and I thought played really well. And I think that is always something worth going back and investigating. What were the sort of reasons for their moves as best we could discern them? And can we incorporate that in our own play, or figure out how to handle it better? And again, we're not going to know his last card. And again, we should really just be looking at the red cards for my decisions and the blue cards for his. So here, I started in 5 again. This will be, how he responds to 5. I did the move that seemed to have most synergy with my hand. I have 2 different plus walls in 8. I have a same wall in 6. Potentially the 7-9, 7-6 can play off that 9. They're not really with my hand. And potentially the 6-8, 6-8 can play off the 6 up. It seemed to me there were a few big synergies and some mini synergies, and this seemed a reasonable starter. So from the last game, how would we think he'd reply? We'd think he would reply with a side matching move that is not committed to flip. So we'd think he'd reply with 2-9, 6A, and 4. This is the only side matching move. When it's matching, the combos aren't nearly as scary, so it's okay if it flips. Obviously, if there's elemental on either of the squares, that changes a bit. And indeed, he did go with this. So I think we have a player who does have the pattern of going in these side squares. The reason I like to go in corners is because then when a corner is played, I know I'm going to have the synergies rather than kind of just hoping I will. But both these games, I got in trouble. Like, I won the last one, but it was ridiculous. I played terrible. He outplayed me severely. And this game is not going to be comfortable for me either. We ended up having the kind of same setup. I ended up going in 3, which is a weird move, given that I can't actually take it back from 2. But I think I just didn't see anything I wanted to play. 7-9, 7-6 seemed important to me to hold on to for 1 or 7 potentially. And also, like, plus wall and 8 seemed like it had more play. The 8-3, 8-9 can go in 1 or 7, but it has no chance to take a second card. So it was a card I really wanted to get out of my hand, and I tried to use it to cover a corner I didn't have covered, though I did know I can't take this back. Weird move. Maybe I should do something going for just the line, just go in 6. But I'm not entirely sure which card I'd want to put there. Right? Because like 197A is probably the easiest card to put there, but that also, in a game that's entirely side to side, that might be a card I really want to hold on to. And maybe I don't want to hold on to the 7976 or 8389 there. So maybe 7976 and 6 is the right move, but that feels weird. 7s are so comboable. It's a number one should be very careful about leaving out facing, especially up and down, actually, just based on where 7s land. And I don't have any plus wall or same wall potential, so it feels very weird to leave that 7 out there. So anyways, we don't care too much about my moves. They weren't great. That's fine. What did he do? He went 6 again. And this time didn't need a high out facing. And it didn't have any combo back potential. And this to me really indicates that the T is a formation he really wants. Now, I think one reason he flipped, or the T spot is a formation he's going for. I think one reason he flipped and was careful to flip is because if he doesn't flip, it's possible he has no card that goes in 2. I think he wanted to keep A8, 2-8, and I think I'm not sure why this card needs to be held on to, right? He could have played like he did last time. Interesting he didn't. Is the idea with a low out facing he is likely to be able to plus wall or same wall or plus or same a card in 9? We know he can grab an 8 or a 6. Not clear if he can grab anything else. So based on last game, a little surprised he didn't go with this move. But I like it because I think when you see the center starter with an A facing out, there is an above average chance of the up-down cards with same numbers to play off it, which indeed I have 2 of. And so avoiding giving another A I could play off of, I think, is actually just a really smart version. If he's not going to do that, could use this, but this is nice play in, probably better play in 1. Yeah. So I guess this makes sense. And again, we're seeing a T-square habit. I didn't love my captures, and you'll notice my captures are completely dominated by his 4-6-A8. But it felt like 6 and 8 numbers out here weren't great. So I ended up going in 7. And he went in 1, locking in his card. And I went for the big setup move, I think. Yeah, I went in 9. Assuming he would go in 2, and I'd have the tie. And indeed, he did go in 2. And that is a tie. The score says 5-4, but that's because he started with 4 cards. I wasn't too worried here. It's hard for him to go in 8. But on the other hand, he just tied easily on second turn, playing in a T formation and just giving up the T-square. And that was fine, specifically with a number that is hard to lock in, though. And I think that was an important part. But again, we see this matching play. Did he have any obvious corner setups that might have been appealing? This would have appealed to me. I might have played this if I were him. What else could be potentially appealing? This also looks like it has some nice points. 296A is great in both 2 and 4. So I think there were a bunch of corner setups that could have been appealing, and that he still went with this matching side means he probably thinks the matching side is the most desirable reply to a center starter. I think that's pretty good evidence of that. It doesn't follow that he's right, and I should copy that, or we should all do that, but it is interesting that with good other options, a really good closed player is going with these matching sides. So if you want to play like Zoom, I think we have found a clear pattern. So let's see what happens in our third game. Again, this is very disorganized and kind of me wandering through the games and having unclear thoughts because it's closed and closed combo, and my thoughts here aren't super clean, especially when trying to discern a player other than my own strategies, and in games where my moves didn't necessarily make sense to me. But I hope something about this is interesting to someone. Very tired. Alright, so I went in 5 per usual. Again, a move that just seemed to have some bigger synergies. You know, I have plus walls in 4. I have same wall in 6. Again, when someone has an A facing out from 5, there's a decent chance they have the plus wall. You should assume it's more likely than average. And some mini synergies like Yuna's 9-6 could potentially plus a 10 somewhere. Or the 9A in 6 could potentially plus a 10, the 9-6 and 8. You know, little synergies like that seemed plausible enough. Now, what do we know about Zoom? We would expect a matching move, right? So I think we'd expect 1A, 4A, and 4, or 4, 7, 9, 9, and 8. Those seem to be the moves. Now, both times in the past, he has chosen to flip. So I would think 1A, 4A, in 4. But maybe I've been overestimating how much he likes these moves, because both times he had at least one same wall as well as matching, right? He matched and had a same wall to go with it. Here, he has no same walls off that 1A, 4A. He has a plus wall that matches off the 4, 7, 9, 9, but it doesn't flip. We have seen him flip so far. This is to say he's not going to end up playing one of the matching sides. I'm not entirely sure why not. So what could be another principle of the previous ones? In the previous, he could take, often matching his matched wall, or his matched side, he could take from a corner, often matching, and with high outfacing in both cases. In one, the 8A47 was high outfacing. In the other, the A874 was pretty high outfacing. Here, if we compare, the recapture here is going to be a 6 or a 7 outfacing from 9, and from 3, I guess it's going to be a 10 outfacing. So I'm not entirely sure why he didn't make this move. It seems in his style. Maybe he does like to flip 5. Maybe he thinks it's important to flip 5, not just match. This one has clearly fewer synergies and harder to have the outfacing. So in retrospect, a bit surprised he didn't play here. This seems like the Zoom move to me. What did he do instead? He played his other type of move. And this is really interesting to me because I think of second turn as you have to challenge, right? You have to do something that gets in first turn's way. And not only did he not do a challenging move, I mean, we don't know his 5th card, but he did something that or not do a, it has low numbers, but it also doesn't set up any synergies for him. That's a very curious move. I guess it sets up 4, 7, 9, 9. I guess the point is he's going to have a 9 outfacing. Now, 9s play really well against elemental squares, so maybe there was elementals in, 9 or 1, but I don't actually think so. Very curious move. And yet, I immediately got myself in trouble. I didn't see any setups in 9. I would like to play 9 here. This is also when I noticed my hand's not so good going down. By 9, I mean 7. I didn't have any good setups in 7. I'd like to go 7, so I started looking at 6 or 8. Probably should have gone 6, just given the directionality of the game. But it can be tricky to go, or sorry, not 6, 4, Jesus, I'm wiped. Probably I should have gone 4, given my hand is much better side-side than up-down. But I think I was dissuaded by the fact that I didn't want to use 5A, 5, 9. I wanted to hold on to that card, and anything else was vulnerable to combos off 5, and I have such little play off 5 once 4 is blocked. So I think one interesting thing about this move is he does a weak corner not near whatever the highest number is. I don't know if that's a relevant pattern, but it is something I notice here. I ended up going here. because 7868 looks awesome now. But is it actually that good? We'll see. And this time, so what would we expect so far? We would expect the t-square, right? We'd expect 1A, 4A, or 4799, or 9586, I guess. But here, out of the corner setup, he does not go the t-square. He goes the q-square with a high out facing, which just happens to completely ruin my hand. I end up going 9. He goes 6. Oh, this is a 3799, not 4799. So it doesn't even have the plus wall in 2. Did look wrong. Yeah, sorry, I typed that in wrong. 3799. Here, I didn't know what to do. There were also some elementals that were weird. The 5 setups are just garbage. I think I ended up going here, and he guaranteed that he wouldn't lose, and we tied 5-5. Again, the scores you see at the bottom aren't right. 5-4 or 4 to 5 is a tie. But, I had a terrible card left at the end. I think that's generally one of the signs of good closed players, is they almost always have a card with decent value facing towards the action at the end, and I did not do that here. So, very suspicious. But in general, as soon as the game was directed down, that was just a very likely thing to have happen. So really, I think this move was the culprit, and I likely should have played something in 4. Really, anything would have been better. But I thought this was an interesting sequence, because we've seen when he goes the matching side, he tends to play the T. So I think if the game has sort of gone as expected, now with the 3 facing up, this makes less sense, because the 1A, 4A does not fit so cleanly in 3, though the A873 gives the same wall there, so there is still same wall plus wall synergy. You can match both ways. So again, surprised he didn't make this move. If I make a sort of weakish L setup or J setup move, something like that, I would expect him to do a T, which would probably... We've seen both high and low out facing on the T. I would guess one of the top 2 cards, but I'm not sure what the zoom move is here. And those, he wouldn't use this card because it has the same wall here, because that's supposed to be a 3. Probably wouldn't use this card either. I bet the 4th card, whatever it is, would have gone in 4, based on what we've seen. Alright, don't feel like I'm actually, figuring much out, but it is interesting. I really am wiped, though. I don't know how apparent that is, but I suspect I have less vim than usual. Alright. I'm going to move on to game 4 of me having first turn. Here I saw I have 2 different double numbers facing down right. The 9s provide some play for the other cards, and I thought this provided a little more, so I stuck that in 5. Now, if we know Zoom, what would Zoom do here? Zoom's going to match. Yeah, Zoom's going to match, and Zoom does match. So Zoom plays in 2. So Zoom has matched every time that Zoom could specifically match while capturing. But the situation where I thought it looked in the last game like a Zoom move, he didn't match when he couldn't take. So we do have a rule for how Zoom replies to center starters now, I think, that we can be pretty confident of. We match when we can flip 5, and that it is a good thing to flip 5, which is interesting. I tend to hold off on flipping 5. I played 7. I think one of the nice things about weak corners when you're on first turn is they are easy to recapture, and they usually use up a card that doesn't face the action, right? Like, if I need to cover 1 or 3, 7-3 A8 is not the card to do it. The only play that it is a card I would still want my hand is probably if my opponent goes 8, which is an argument for going in the T-square, which we have seen Zoom do in the past. So before I look and try to figure out what the move is, In the past, Zoom has gone in the T-square, so Zoom's probably going to go 8. He hasn't cared very much whether it has high outfacing, but probably going to use the card that has least play here. So we don't know what the 5th card is, but 8-8, 1A, and 8 looks like the Zoom move, though it does look to me vulnerable to combos on 5. But I guess the combos on 5 don't necessarily happen that much. Second turn always is first access to those squares, if it wants it. So that's the move Yep, and that is the move that was played. Now here I thought my 9-2-8-9 and 2-9-9-8 are pretty good going down as my T coverage. 9-2-8-9 covers everything but a 9 facing up from 6. 2-9-9-8 covers everything but a 10 facing up from 4. I can go into the T. Even if they have the combo, I'm not necessarily screwed, and if they don't, I think I'm in great shape. Somehow, he had the combo and the 9 facing up. That was the one thing I couldn't work against in that square, but then I got very lucky because he gave the low number. Giving a low number, I think, was very smart. Specifically, I don't know what the other card was, of course, but you kind of want to avoid 6s and 7s hanging out there because they're basically always going to get captured and kind of likely to get comboed. I got lucky with the end combo. Due to the elemental, I do not win this game. Interesting. I think there was an elemental on 5, so it doesn't end up flipping 8 or something like that. But I end up winning this one 6-4. So now 2 wins and 2 ties, and you may be thinking I'm doing well. But I also think I'm getting outplayed every game, and we haven't seen the disaster that was me on second turn. But I like how he's handling these. I did feel good about this T. This was the first game, and then after he played this, it was, oh shit, it's not nearly as, it's terrible instead of good, but then I got lucky at the end. But I felt pretty good about this T. I still feel good about this T. But it does give... I think we pretty clearly have the primary Zoom strategy on second turn against center starters. Match, and then set up a T. And I don't have full understanding for which cards he's putting in the T-square and 8 here. But it's probably just the card that has least play, because we've seen him put high outfacing, we've seen him put low outfacing, we've seen him flip stuff, we've seen him not flip stuff. So I think more than about what's being put in 8, it's about what's being kept in the rest of the hand. And that certainly makes sense here. So that gives an interesting pattern of play. And then the 5th game will show another example of his backup plan. So... gonna put in the cards. This will be the last game of me on first turn, and then I think I'll end the video and record another one of me on second turn, and things will go worse. Spoilers. So... I played 8, 3, 8, 9, and 5. This made a lot of sense to me. People like to use cards that don't have 10s in 5. They tend to use their kind of lower numbered card. I have a bit of that bias too, but more than that, 6, 8, 8, 3 seems like it would be great in 2 or 6. And potential little setups and synergies elsewhere, but that was the big one that really drew me to this move. Now, interestingly, so he doesn't have A4, 2A, and 9. That's not fully supported. And he doesn't have an obvious corner to me, but we know he doesn't love the corners, the strong corners. He doesn't have a matching move. So again, he went with a weak corner. So I think this is just a pattern. I think we have the priority list of we have matching side that captures is the top thing to do. And then the second best thing to do following Zoom is the weak corner. And again, this is such a weird play to me because I look to challenge or set up synergies on second turn, and this sets up a same wall in 2. That's something. but not a whole lot. Nothing on 5, right? It doesn't give any combos on 5. And that's very curious to me. I think one thing this says is that Zoom does not value corners that highly. Zoom will hold on to verticals and horizontals a little more than I might, and hold on to corners less. Which is interesting. I think I set up the line here, yeah. I noticed I had some synergies. 9497 now has a plus in 8 and a plus wall in 4. And my 6883 is still pretty good in 2 or 6. They're not that great in 6, but all my other cards are fine in 6. So I thought this was pretty promising. It is the first time we've gotten a line for a slash setup, and we did get a J setup, and he went in the Q square. Now we know he's gone in the T square usually out of the J setup, but he's done that out of the matching side. In the weak corner J setup, he went in the Q spot. And so I think, unsurprisingly, he goes in a Q spot again. The 9 was not facing an elemental, as I recall, but I still could not capture it. So that was annoying. But interesting that he just, gives me lots of stuff I can flip and doesn't mind. Now, as it just so happens, that 4 happens to be very annoying for me. So maybe I should think my hands were a little weird here because I had trouble with normal numbers, and it just happened to play out that way, and shouldn't be so impressed with how much trouble I felt in every game. But it was 9 games of feeling like I was in trouble every move, and that's very rare. So I think whatever he was doing, whatever wizardry this is, it was working. So I took the Q. I don't have a move in 7. I didn't see why I shouldn't take the Q. Could have gone in 4, I guess, but I took the Q. He goes in 9, building out. I can't touch that, but I can play pretty safely here. And we ended up with a tie. Of course, he took the one he could take and tie, and didn't take the one he couldn't. So out of my first turn games, I won 2 and tied 3, but I think I was pretty solidly outplayed. And I think the main takeaways for how Zoom plays second turn against center starters is the top thing he wants to do is match and capture with a plus or same wall. If he has that, he will likely follow up with a T setup. Now, the game I played against him where I played a line instead of going into the J, he did a really interesting way of going into the plus that I guess I won't get into here. But because he's capturing starters so much, the main setups he's going to get are J's and lines. And in the J, he goes with the T, and he goes with the card in the T that he wants to hold on to least. And I think he's good at selecting that. And in the J, we only saw it once, but he went in the Q square, and he also went in a Q square in the slash formation, as we saw in this game. So I think Q squares, T went out of a side, Q went out of a weak corner. The weak corner plays I don't really get, but clearly they worked for him against me. And I think they're interesting and just not something sort of in the range of moves I look at. So I thought this was all interesting. I'm sorry I'm so out of it. I feel like I should have made a more coherent, put together, compelling video, but this was me sort of wandering through some closed moves and trying to apply some rationales to moves that aren't the kind of moves I'd make. And I guess I'm going to try to record the video as first turn games. Good luck to me.